Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Perperis. Not joining me is Brenna Calvert, but I do have another special guest this week. This week's episode is brought to you by UFOS. So if you're racing long or racing hard, like we do with OCR, and you're looking to recover, check out UFOS. They have sandals and shoes that promote recovery. So they have their own foam. It's called UFoam. The name comes from when people put on the shoes or the sandals, they typically go, ooh, because it's so soft, right? So what's cool about this foam is it absorbs more impact per step. So compared to traditional running shoe foam, it absorbs 37% more impact, which means you're going to recover faster because there's less impact on your feet after these long endurance events. So if you're looking for a great gift, whether that be for an athlete, an OCR athlete, or just a family member that wants to walk around in some comfortable sandals, check out UFOS. Their website is ufos.com, OOFOS.com. This week, joining me on the show, I have Allison Tai. If you don't know who Allison Tai is, you're probably not paying attention to the world of ultra-distance obstacle course racing because she is one of the best there is. She won the Spartan Point Series in 2015. She's won every Ultra Beast she's ever raced, which includes 2 Ultra Beast finishes in 1 week, which was Tahoe and Sun Peak. She's also won the Toughest Mudder Series this year. I think racing 5 out of the 6 events and coming in first a couple times and second a couple times. And then she also won the Holy Grail this year, as well as 2 second-place finishes at World's Toughest Mudder. So, Allison, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So I'm really glad we got you on the show because I've been wanting to get you on for a while, and every time I was about to message you, Will Hicks would bring you on the show on his World's Toughest podcast, and I'd be like, all right, well, let me give it some time then. So,
yeah, I seem to be on that show quite a bit. I love Will Hicks. I love the podcast, and it's always just fun to be on that one. But yeah, I do feel like I've had my fair share of World's Toughest Mudder podcast time. That is for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just had another. I'm not sure if it's going to be released after or before this, but I just interviewed Marco Bedard, and I was telling him that, it's weird coming from. Originally I was outside the sport looking in, so I was looking at all these top athletes, and then I entered the sport and doing pretty well, especially at the ultra distance races. So it was weird going from fan of the sport to competitive athlete in the sport and then friends with some of the top athletes. And I'm going to put it out there that you are my favorite OCR female athlete, period.
Oh my gosh, that's very sweet. Especially just given the amount of just amazing characters we have out there for female athletes in the sport. And it's like a huge reason why I'm just so proud to be a part of the sport is just the people that are involved in it. We have some people that are kind of outliers and aren't necessarily built the same way as the rest of us. But, I just think there's some really, really cool people involved in the sport. Most people are really humble and just really down to earth and here because we love the sport. So, yeah, it definitely makes that for a very interesting dynamic with the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I will say that when you're racing against my teammates, I do cheer for them. So total transparency here.
Oh yeah, that's fair enough.
Anyway, so we have Allison on the show not only because she's had an incredible season, but because she's going to the Spartan Ultra World Championships in Iceland in about 10 days. So what we're going to do is something a little bit different. So we're actually going to record half of this episode now before the race. And then after she gets back, we're going to record the other half so you can kind of see her expectations going into the race. And then we can talk about the results and how those actually played out all in one episode for you, the listener. Cool. So before we get into that, let's talk about some of your background in endurance sports. So give us a quick rundown of kind of where you came from and then kind of how you got into Ultra-OCR.
Okay, so basically I was not active at all growing up. I actually only got into running to kind of lose weight when I went back to college as a mature student. So I started just kind of jogging like your local 5 and 10K, and then I went and saw this Canadian death race. A bunch of my friends were doing it as legs, right, the relay style. So it's 125 kilometers. I'm not really sure what that equals miles-wise, but a lot. I think probably 80 miles or something like that. And so they break it down into legs. And I was just watching the first place man, and he was just cruising through, and he just looked like he was on this like incredible, amazing adventure. And although I was like horrifically sedentary as a child, I did a lot of hiking. So I'm from northern Alberta, and we did a lot of like hiking and stuff in the Rocky Mountains when I was young. And it just kind of brought that back home for me, just that being out there and adventuring in the mountains and the outdoors and kind of you against the elements. So anywho, I went back that next year, and basically I went from like, I think my longest run was a 10K to doing this 125 kilometer race solo. And then I did a little bit of ultramarathon, kind of found my way into Ironman, did a couple of Ironman, and really got into that. And then, as those of you who know my story, I got hit by a truck and kind of taken right out of activity at all for the next year. Broke my back, my arm, my pelvis, whole bunch of nerve damage, that stuff. So it took a while to get back, and I had, unfortunately, really severe damage in my left hand, and I couldn't feel it for like a year and a half, couldn't move it at all. I had shattered my radial nerve. So I couldn't swim, and it was really frustrating, because when I'd stroke with my left hand, it would just kind of plunk into the water and almost send me shooting backwards. So it really kind of got me out of triathlon, but then back to my real passion, which was running, and particularly on the trails and in the mountains and whatnot. Moved to Vancouver, and we started this running store, and the owner made me do this Warrior Dash thing, and I was like, oh, this is so lame. I don't want to do this like mud run thing. But I went out there, and I just loved it. And that was 2011, so the first Warrior Dash they had here. And yeah, I honestly just haven't looked back since. I was doing a lot of like rehab and cross training and a little bit of CrossFit at that time, just because of all the injuries I had sustained. So I think it set me up pretty well to go into obstacle course racing, just because I was a lot more diverse than I had been before my accident, when all I was doing was running basically in a straight line and swimming, I guess, riding in a straight line. But yeah, it got me doing a whole bunch more stuff, and that just really translated well to obstacle course racing.
Cool. And then when did you switch over to kind of the ultra distance obstacle course racing? How did that transition occur?
Well, I'm not fast. I have zero speed or power in my entire body, which anybody who has ever seen me try to do Everest or has had to haul my butt over has seen, like, witnessed firsthand. So basically I have like one speed on or off kind of thing. So I've always kind of gravitated toward long distance stuff. Even when I did triathlon, oh, sorry, my phone's going. Even when I went into, I know, right, the funny ringtone. But even when I went into triathlon, I didn't go into your sprint or Olympic distance. I went straight to Ironman. So when I went into obstacle course racing, I did that Warrior Dash and whatever, and then I was like, okay, instantly, what is the longest event I can do? Because that's always going to be kind of my happy place where I can just jog along all day and have this adventure. So yeah, it just kind of naturally went there. I can't remember the first race I did. It was probably the Sun Peaks Ultra Beast, because that was one of the first Ultra Beasts there was. So I don't know what year that was, but it was definitely, as soon as I got into obstacle course racing, I gravitated right to that long stuff.
Right on. So before we get into your expectations for Iceland and kind of some information about that event, you just finished second at World's Toughest Mudder, which was November 11th-ish, something like that. What has your training and schedule been like since World's Toughest Mudder? Because I know personally I get sick immediately after the race every year, and I'm pretty much out of commission for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, I had a rough week kind of there right after the race, but I had planned anyways to take it totally off, and like the traveling back home, we went to Disneyland, all that stuff. So I totally took off training for the week, and then I came back and I probably ran a little hard and my hip felt funny, so I ended up taking the entire following week off of any like impact stuff. So I did a lot of my coach is Yancey Kalt, and he's just phenomenal about being able to really vary the training, which is particularly good for an older athlete like myself, and somebody who's had such a big orthopedic past in orthopedic injury, just with so many injuries in my body. So did a bunch of incline training and cycling and stuff like that. And now we're just kind of tapering back down for the race and doing a lot of sharp, just getting the body back and getting it feeling race ready. So yeah, focusing a lot more on less impact. I'm back to running. My hip feels great. I feel great. So this has been a really quick turnover. And I think in my mind, I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous that I didn't even sign up for Iceland until after World's Toughest because I really wanted to see how my body would recover and react. But in my mind, that period was just so short that it almost feels like it's surprisingly long. It's just kind of like your perception of that. So since I had this in my mind that it was just such a short turnaround, it's actually feeling like this period between is a lot longer.
Yeah, well, I know for me personally, like that final 2 weeks leading up to World's Toughest, I feel like every day drags on because I wanted to get out there and kind of get it over with. So I don't know, maybe that helps a little bit. You're kind of looking forward to the big race in Iceland.
Yeah, it's weird how it just kind of warps time, right? Like that last week before the race seems so long. Like you have, it just adds years to your life, I'm sure, to have these huge races on your calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of our listeners are fairly familiar with World's Toughest Mudder and the 5-mile format with 21-ish obstacles and kind of the first hour's obstacle-free. So I know they started releasing details about the Iceland race, so let's start off with, what do you know about Iceland and, kind of as you go through, kind of compare that to World's Toughest Mudder so people have a reference point.
So, Las Vegas in November has very limited hours of daylight, that is sure, and it does feel like most of the race is in the dark, but in Iceland, most of the race is actually in the dark. So I think that they have about 3 hours of daylight and 21 hours of darkness. So there is the big difference. Plus, it's going to be a heck of a lot colder, but then the kind of neat thing is that the cold is very predictable. So you're not going to see a huge amount of weather fluctuation and temperature fluctuation like you did in the desert. It's going to be very consistent and very steady. So I think it's going to be a lot easier to prepare because the weather's probably not going to change greatly. That being said, the wind can blow in. It could start raining. It could start snowing. It's kind of right around that 0 degree mark where anything can kind of happen. And it's just known for being a very harsh environment. So we're definitely going to have to deal with some weather. So I think, people are just preparing as best they can for that. But Spartan has released that they're not going to have us in and out of water. So that'll be a big change also from World's Toughest because one of the big reasons you get so cold at WTM is just because you're constantly being submerged in water. So that's not going to happen here. So you see a lot of people that are doing more like cross-country ski style gear rather than the wetsuit type stuff. That being said, we're still going to be crawling and the ground's going to be wet, right? So, and if it rains or sleets, we're still going to get wet. So I think, in my perspective, it's best to prepare for being wet because I know even on those low crawls, if there's any amount of water on the ground, you're still going to get water all the way down your front and still get pretty wet. And there's also going to be some thermal stream crossings and whatnot. And they're saying that it's going to be up to your knees. So who knows? I guess it depends how tall you are. But you're still going to get wet. The weather is definitely going to be a huge factor. The elevation in the course, it's also substantially bigger in Iceland. So I think it was, 300. You probably know this way better than me. 300 per lap at World's Toughest Mudder, and I think it's nearly 600 at Iceland. So I think it's about double per lap, and the laps are actually 6 miles and not 5, which is a bit weird. And I think you're not going to have as many technical grip obstacles, and that's going to be a big change as well.
So for those of us listening from America, she was referencing meters, not feet. So World's Toughest Mudder was about 850 feet per lap, and Iceland I think it was something like 16 or 1700 feet per lap. But
there you go, half.
Something like that.
We'll go with that. It's so funny because I don't understand Fahrenheit, or I kind of understand feet. But yeah, I'm always talking meters and Celsius. I really don't understand Fahrenheit when people start, there's some formula, but I'm not good enough. I understand miles and kilometers, though. I've figured that one out. So yes, there's going to be a lot more elevation, and I think it's probably going to be, this typical Spartan where it's based on heavy carries.
Well, I'm from America, but I also agree that meters and kilometers is a much better system. But we've already sunken too much money into feet and miles, so that's what we're stuck with.
Yeah,
so.
Keep it up. Well, it's good to do both, right? It keeps the brain sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned, kind of preparing for everything. And again, this is coming out before the actual race goes on. So what are you planning on wearing to start the race off with, right? Because as I'm tracking, there's essentially a 5K or 3-mile penalty-free run at the beginning, obstacle-free run at the beginning, and then you go into the 6-mile loops with the 16-ish obstacles.
Yeah, and I believe that first 5K is through the town and fairly flat. So I think that should be really neat because part of the reason why, you're so excited to go to a new place is to kind of experience the culture and kind of immerse yourself in the way that they live. So, and for me, it's going to be a very short trip. So being able to see the town that way is going to be really neat. And it should be daylight at that time, so we should actually see some things. But I'm going to start off just with a merino wool base layer and maybe they always say base layer, insulative layer, and then a windproofer at the top. So I'm just going to wear, your basic merino wool base layer and then just a shell on the bottom, waterproof shell on the bottom. And then I have a little just a very light insulative layer for a jacket. And then I'll put the waterproof, windproof jacket on top of that, just a really light one. And then I have heavier stuff if I need it. But I'm definitely going to start off with my lighter stuff, and if I get wet, then I have stuff to change, because I do think that might be a factor. If you get wet and it's that cold, even if it is just groundwater, you're going to be miserable.
All right, so we're going to look into our crystal ball for a minute and try to predict the future, and then kind of see how accurate we are on the second part of this podcast. So let's start off with, what do you think the winning mileage will be for men and for women? Because obviously there's a lot more elevation change, but at the same time there's less obstacles. But at the same time, some of those obstacles may take longer, right? Like a bucket carry is going to slow you down a little more than a set of monkey bars per se. So what do you think the winning mileage will be?
For the men, I'd say 90 to 100. It's super weird, right, with the 6-mile loops, because you don't actually run 100 miles. You're running, whatever that.
Yeah.
division is in 6. So, you're actually going to have to run over that. So I would say somewhere between 90 to 100 for men and 80 to 90 for women. Can I have a huge range like that?
Sure. I was going to go with 80 for women and 90 for men. That's what I was going to go with.
Yeah.
So I was going towards the lower end of that due to the elevation change. And then I also think, I think, with the term between World's Toughest and this, I know Robert Killian's planning on doing both, right? Or last time I checked, he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're doing both. I think you might see a small degradation in performance based off how close they are together.
Absolutely. Just physiologically, that's just, I absolutely agree. And then just with the terrain, the fact that loops are 6 miles, the heavy carries, and then just the technicality of running on lava rocks, it might not be, maybe slick. So we're going to see just vastly different terrain than in World's Toughest Mudder, and with the heavy carries, it might slow people down. I don't think 100 miles is super doable, on this course, but Killian is also an absolute machine, so who knows?
Yeah, what was I going to say? Again, kind of like so many factors that it's really hard to predict. I know, for example, I did a True Grit Enduro 2.4 this past year, and I think the winner comes in at 85 or 86 miles. Even though you look at the elevation change on the course and it looks real low, but in the middle of the course there's a mile water movement that's knee to waist deep that really slows down your pace. So,
wow.
A lot of factors that could play into the overall mileage. And then we'll do one more kind of future prediction before we call it for this podcast and pick it up in part 2. based off who you know is going, because I'm not tracking everyone super well. Who do you think? Let's go with top 3 men. Let's get some predictions here.
So I don't know everybody who's going. I probably am more out of the loop in terms of who's going to be showing up at this one than WTM. But I do know that obviously Robert Killian is planning on going, and that guy's a machine, and he is going to put in as many miles as he possibly can. So he's definitely going to be on the podium pending some injury there. And Mark Jones, I know, is also going. So I expect to see them both on the podium. And I'm not sure in terms of who else is going to be there for the men's.
Okay, I would agree with both those predictions. I think those are both very strong contenders, obviously both with a military background. So if you read my article, Military Vets at World's Toughest Mudder, that article references both of them. Now let's move on to ladies. Let's take yourself out of the equation. I'm going to make the bold prediction that you're going to win. So let's remove you. Let's go with the next 3 females on the list. Who do you think is going to be up there?
Well, I know Morgan Mackay's going, and she climbs well. She does obstacles really well. Unfortunately, she suffered a fall in the earlier hours of World's Toughest Mudder, so I think she's definitely going to be someone to watch for. She's not going to have the same level of fatigue as the athletes that went into the full 24 hours at World's Toughest, but who knows, how her injury affected her. It seems like she just it was one of those injuries that's very dramatic at the time, and then she bounced back. So I definitely will see her up there. Casey Northup, I know, is going. And then in terms of both the men and the women, actually, I think Novakovic is going. Hey, did I see that? He's an amazing climber, and I expect him to do well for the men's side. But we don't really know who's coming over from Europe, right? There's some amazing trail runners there, some amazing obstacle course racers, and I don't know if everybody knows exactly who's coming, right? So I don't really want to call them dark horses, but you're going to have probably a lot of very high-level European athletes just going out there and crushing the course. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the podium shakes out.
Cool. Well, again, I agree. I think those are all good picks. Before we get going for part 1, let's talk about Van City OCR real quick. So give me some details on that.
So that is a obstacle gym that I started with this other fellow. So he's really into the Ninja Warrior style, short, explosive stuff. And obviously I'm into the very opposite thing. So we started this gym. It's, kind of rainy and dark here in the winter months, and we needed an indoor place to train. So yeah, it's a Ninja Warrior gym. We do obstacle training for Tough Mudder and Spartan and stuff like that. It's really neat. We got all the obstacles, platinum rig. And it's just, it's a really fun place. And I think it's really helped with my grip strength in particular, and just continue to get better on the obstacles by actually doing them. Because I think that's a big component that it has just been hugely helpful, at least for me, just to get that technique and work on the grip strength while having fun rather than just hanging from a pull-up bar. Because although that's effective, and it's good for your mental strength, it can be tough.
Yeah, it's not the same just kind of hanging and doing stationary movements on a pull-up bar. The pulling motion and the transition and everything, it's the more specific you can get the training, the better. So obviously a place like Van City OCR or, any other ninja gyms or permanent obstacle course facility is always a good option for training. So
yeah, exactly.
All right, Allison, well, thanks for coming on. We will check in with you in about 2 weeks, and then we will release this episode. Best of luck. Actually, I'm not going to say that because I don't believe in luck. I think you make your own luck. But I know you're going to do well in Iceland, so go crush it. And I'm curious to see how it turns out.
Super. Thanks for having me on the podcast. And yeah, it's going to be pretty neat coming back and recapping the event and comparing the two. I love this idea, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
And we are back on the Strength and Speed podcast. It's been a week and a half since the first part of the episode that we just recorded. So now we have Allison Tai back on the line post Iceland. Allison, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah. Let's before we get into the actual race, let's talk about some of the results. So I'm just going to kind of run down the top 5 men and top 5 women with their mileages based off what Spartan posted on their website. So for the men, it was Joshua Fiore with 71 miles, Pavel Polinsky, I'm probably butchering all these names, with 71 miles. David Dietrich, 71 miles. Chris Lemke, 64 miles. And Robert Killian in fifth, 64 miles. And for the women, we had first place Morgan McKay with 57 miles. Sorry, someone's calling me in the middle of the podcast. Vanessa Gebhardt with 57 miles. Allison Tai with 57 miles. Katrin Thomasdottir with 50 miles. And Lillian Keller with 50 miles. So I think we overestimated the mileage based off of part one. I can't remember the exact numbers we said, but I think we were saying like men in the night, like around 90, and women around 70 or 80. I can't remember what we said.
Yeah, I feel like we said. Now we'll have to look back. That's so funny, but I think we said like women around. In the days leading up, we were saying women around 60, and then men around 75. But not in the last podcast.
Yeah. I probably should have listened to that one beforehand. Anyway, people right now are listening at their home being like, you just said it 2 minutes ago. Yelling at their phones or their...
Yeah.
But, okay. So, let's start off with you. How was your race? So, how did you feel?
I felt really good. So, obviously, I had just come off World's Toughest Mudder. And so, basically, between the two races, all I did was recover. And then kind of that blended into my taper period. So I was actually surprised. My body felt pretty good going in, and so that wasn't a big issue. But the course itself was like treacherous. It was super, super icy, and the conditions were obviously just really extreme. So it was a difficult race. It was a challenging race, but I was in really good spirits the entire time, and so that was kind of my A goal going into this. I know I had a really good performance for me this year at World's Toughest Mudder, but I just didn't really soak in the experience. I didn't really feel like I was there, and just really absorbing and appreciating each a piece of the race. So for this one, I just really wanted to go and kind of soak up the experience and just really be there mentally and just be really grateful for the experience of being there. And I think I did really well at that. I was in really good spirits the whole time, and I just had a blast. Really appreciated the fact that we were in such a different terrain. It was just so unique. There was nothing like it. We were running past these geysers that kept on going off, constantly, and just the northern lights coming up later into the race, and just the terrain that you'd never seen. There was no trees. It was super barren. Obviously, there was lots of ice and snow and rock everywhere, and it was just it was just a really, really cool experience when you looked up and kind of realized where you were.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you touched at a very important point, the mental aspect of, ultra-distance racing, and going in there with a strong mind and really enjoying the experience probably helps you perform and bounce back quicker than maybe some of our peers who did both races. And also, obviously, a huge congratulations, back-to-back finishes at 24-hour World Championship level OCRs a month apart is very impressive. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think especially, if you're doing two races or really any race at that distance, you kind of have to go easy on yourself, right? And if you go in with these crazy expectations for your performance, and everything's going to be a letdown, right? And just really, you don't go easy enough on yourself, and you're just so obsessed with whatever the result is, and this expectation of how you're going to do, you're just going to have a miserable time. So I think just kind of going easy on yourself and kind of lowering your expectations. I did a bunch of talking on how you do the back-to-back races, and I'm certainly no expert, but I think that's a huge part of it, because so much of a 24-hour race is mental. So I think just to cut yourself some slack and go out there and just enjoy, particularly the second race, is just super important. And it's hard when you're in Iceland to, have a miserable time anyways, because it's just the wind was blowing at one point. Morgan and I were running together at the top of the mountain, and it really felt like we were going to blow right off. I would not have been surprised if both of us just got picked up and blew right off the mountain. The wind was so strong. And just one lap it would be this intense wind, and you're like, okay, so this is going to be it. This is how the rest of the race is going to go. And then the next race there's zero wind, but it's raining. And then the next race is or the next lap it's hail, right? So each lap had such a distinct story, right? that it just really made it interesting that you just weren't even sure what you were heading out in for the next lap. But it was all super intense. Like, it wasn't just like a little drizzle. It was like crazy sideways blowing rain when it was raining, right? And it, the hail was like big and sharp, and everything, it seemed like, was just like super intense. So it just made it really fun to try to kind of guess what was coming next. And then obviously, just with the amount of gear that we had, thankfully, most of us, that we were pretty well prepared. So it was, despite how intense the conditions were, I think everybody was really well prepared for it gear-wise, and I think that kind of went a long way.
Yeah, someone posted a video earlier today. This was today, Thursday the 21st, like showing one of the windstorms, and it looked pretty bad. Like, you're right, it looked like people were about to get lifted up and blown off the mountain.
Yeah, I was doing the monkey bars at one point. I think Morgan was actually there with me at this point as well. And, it's like the ones with the kind of gap that go up and down. And just before one of the gaps, a gust came at me. And so it literally like blew me backwards instead of forwards. And then, so I stopped, but I had to kind of regain like my motion. And then the gust changed and went at me at the side. And I kind of like did like the human flag. And I'm, sitting there holding on to these monkey bars, blowing in every which direction, and you're kind of trying to time the gusts to like keep moving forward. It was pretty hilarious. Or the spear throw was like ridiculous. Morgan and I got there. We ran a lap together, and when we got there, it was like, okay, so we're gonna throw this spear, and somehow in 100-mile wind, it's gonna. I know there's somebody that threw it. They stood at the very end. They threw it, and it hit the bale 3 rows down. So just had to really account for the wind, but.
Yeah, I think if I would have gone, I would have been doing burpees every lap because of that spear throw. That is not my forte. I do not practice it enough to really get it pretty much ever. So.
Yeah, I'm usually I more get the spear throw than I don't. But there it was really tricky until the wind died down, and then I got it a few times. But in the gusts like that, I actually waited one time until the wind died down, and as soon as the spear left my hand, another gust came. So I was like, forget it. Next time, I'm just throwing and praying.
So one of the things they did interesting was they had a passport book, right? And they would mark if you failed the obstacle, and you had to do all your burpees at the end of each lap. How did that work out? And did you like that, or would you have preferred to do the burpees at the obstacle that you failed?
I think everybody would have preferred to do the burpees at the obstacle, just because then they wouldn't have stacked up. But did I like that we had to do that? Yes, just because it was so miserable. So yeah, you'd go and you'd collect these little stamps. And I had it backwards at first, but figured it out. And so each obstacle that you did out of these 6 obstacles, you could get a burpee. So I knew somebody that, I was talking to somebody that did 180 one lap when it was like raining or something. He was slipping all over the place and ended up doing 180. The most I ever did was 90, and that was more than enough. But yeah, so then you go in and you turn it in at the end, and then they stamp it with the final 3 burpees. And then, you have to go ahead and do all those burpees back to back. And it was like in the rockiest, wettest pit. Like, it was like, you're like in a puddle with really sharp rocks. So it was just like miserable, but that's kind of what made it fun. Like, it was like this pit of like burpee misery at the end of each lap. And so that was the only time where I was like, oh my goodness, I could not be in a good mood at that burpee pit, but the rest of it, I was, in quite a good mood except for that one. So yeah, it was cold, it was miserable, it was wet, but it was really Spartan, and I think it really like kind of helped shape the event. I don't know that they'll do it in the future, but you can see how that would have been so much easier to account for proper burpees, like just having everybody there at the end with the cameras rather than having all these elites out on course, and you don't know who's doing the proper burpees, and they're looking at all these cameras, and they had to have so many more volunteers. And I know obviously it's really hard to get volunteers at a race like Iceland, and so I was super impressed with Spartan being able to pull it off, and us not really see that lack of volunteers. So I think that they kind of, they did everything right in terms of minimizing the volunteers that they had, and that was part of it. And I mean, all the elites were on the same playing field, that we all did our burpees at the end. Open racers were able to complete their burpees at the obstacles, and they did. But so, it was a level playing field, and it definitely was more challenging stacking them up at the end, but that kind of made it fun.
So with with the distinction between open and elite for a 24-hour event, did people, I guess obviously people had to sign up for one or the other beforehand. So I guess what's my question? Like how World's Toughest Mudder, sometimes people who were not expecting to be up there are up there, like near the top of the field.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to qualify. So they had like separate bibs and everything. So the open racers actually had these like super slick black bibs, and we had these like god awful fuchsia and green bibs. They were so bad. So yeah, if you were an open racer, you had a black bib and you were totally running a different race, right? You were just running the finish. There was no crossover. Like you couldn't just jump from open to elite, just like in a regular Spartan race. How you like start in a different heat. It was the same. It was a setup like that where you couldn't just like jump into elite all of a sudden.
Gotcha. Cool. And then you said the terrain. I heard the terrain was pretty gnarly as far as elevation and ice. Take us through some of that.
Oh my God. So we had this like little 5K prologue through the streets, which was super cool in this little town. But I was so ready for the Iceland experience and this took me a long while. I'm not very smart and I'm super clumsy. So we're running through this like 5K road race, and I went to take a corner and I was looking up and I went down just like a sack of bricks, just because the ground was super icy. And so that was my first fall. And then you get to the start of the race basically. And so that 5K, that was it for running pretty much for me. That it was just like power hiking the whole time, because it was super slick. And if there was an area that didn't have too much ice, there was a lot of rocks and like these really hard clumps. And you weren't really sure if you were going to put your foot directly on black ice. So it wasn't like, we have ice here that's like kind of like hard and crispy, and you can kind of like, it's slippery, but it's not that slippery. You can still kind of get a little bit of traction. This was like black ice with like a layer of water on top of it for the most part. And then things would freeze and then unfreeze, and then, like into the morning they'd freeze again. And so it just ended up being like super slick the entire way on the course. So yeah, if there's any sort of a camber or whatever, you were going down, and you hit a patch of ice. So people were falling like 100 times on a lap, right? Like just like stand up, down, stand up, down. And then with the elevation, you're trying to climb this hill, and you ended up having to like bear crawl, but like, so you'd be looking for rocks that stuck out enough, or at least that you could you grab the upper side of the rock so that you wouldn't slide down. It would at least stop you mostly from sliding. So you grab that with your hand, and then you like put your foot where your hand was, because there's like very limited holds and everything else is just sheer ice and you're on the side of this mountain. So you'd like replace it and then like look for it, and it was just like, oh my goodness, it was just crazy. And then on the way down, obviously, it was just terrifying because it's like rocks and sheer ice. Like that's all you got, right? And even the rocks had this like black sheen of ice on them. So a lot of people were just crab walking or just like sitting on their bums and going down. But with all the rocks, I was pretty cautious about that. At World's Toughest Mudder, the year I busted up my knee, so last year, they had a tarp, and they had rocks under the tarp, and I hit a rock with my sit bone on one side, and my hamstring on that side is still not 100% because I just totally cracked it. So I'm super cautious. I don't want to break my tailbone or anything on some rocks. So I kind of tried to like crab walk sideways, but it was super slow moving. And then there's so many heavy carries, and it was still like really, really icy. So you're like walking with this sandbag. Sometimes I'd put the sandbag on my back and just crawl if it was really slick. But yeah, the ice was a huge factor, and just really made it challenging, especially for those of us. Like I'm very cautious just because I'm so clumsy. And yeah, it got a little tiring after you fell down so many times. You'd just be like, I just don't want to fall again. Poof, down on your back, right? Like, oh man. So yeah, it definitely gave it some character.
How did you deal with the time zone change? I know, you flew in pretty much a day before the race, or, a day and a half, and then had to go into a new time zone, but at the same time it was dark for most of the race, like 20 hours, right? So how did that, did you feel the effect of jet lag or anything on the course?
With the mandatory meeting, we had to go up and be at this convention center for like 3 p.m. or something. So I think if we wouldn't have had to do that, I just would have slept my normal sleeping pattern here. But that, kind of broke things up. So my strategy really, and I think most people's strategy, was just sleep as much as you can. So, I just went back to the hotel and I just slept when I could, and when I couldn't, I just, stretched or tried to relax and not stress out about the fact that we're all going to be jet lagged and we're not getting enough sleep and yada yada. But yeah, I was not enough sleep. And even after the race, I don't think a lot of people slept very well. So coming back here, I was kind of like, okay, so I need to get a good night's sleep, because I don't think for the entire space of the trip I slept more than 3 hours. But, your body just deals with it. And it's funny because it's like, people are like, oh, aren't you worried about the race and the jet lag? And I'm like, it's 24 hours. Like, at some point, everybody's going to be tired. And when I'm like being at 1 a.m. because, I'm super jet lagged, other people are going to be tired, like the people from Germany and, Sweden. Those people are going to be tired when we're awake. So, at some point, everybody gets a chance to feel like garbage.
Yeah.
So I think it'll all even out. Yeah.
I know I feel terrible after every 24-hour race. Like, I never sleep good for a night or two. It's just my body aches every time I move. Something hurts. My sleep schedule's all messed up. I'll wake up in the middle of the night hungry because, your body was used to just burning a ton of fuel. So, like, you can't eat enough. I don't know.
Yeah, your hormones are so messed up too. Like, I just find I feel like for days. I felt like more jet lagged than I did just burnt out from this race. So I don't know. Like, I didn't have the typical world's toughest mudder where I just feel like I have the flu or something. I just kind of felt more like I was jet lagged and really tired. And maybe that's just because I was so jet lagged and tired. It kind of like masked it. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think for world's toughest, it's the constant dunking in water that, plus the exposure to the elements, that gets you.
Yeah.
Because I've done a whole bunch of other 24-hour OCRs this year, and I don't get sick after any of them, but I get sick every single year after World's Toughest, without fail. So. Yeah,
there's something magical there. How like skin all peels off and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if that happens in Atlanta. Like, if it's the repeated dunking or the repeated dunking with the stand. I don't know, but.
Yeah, and if the skin peels off, I'm curious about that too. It'll be interesting. Definitely different conditions.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what about the obstacles? I know. Did Spartan debut any new obstacles, or was it the standard Spartan affair? How was that?
Standard, but I think a lot of people were surprised at how many obstacles they bring out. So they thought, at least the chatter I was hearing, was that they weren't going to be able to do a big build. So it would be very basic, like old school Spartan. So we'd have like a wall and a rope climb and, maybe a small rig. But they had like every obstacle was full size. They had like 3 sections of twister. They had multi-rig, rope climb, the monkey bars, just stacked the Tyrolean, Hercoist, and then they had a lot of heavy stuff. So they had 2 long sandbag carries, and the sandbags were frozen. So they were more like Atlas stone carries, because they were like frozen in this like awful giant football type situation. And so like holding them on your neck was so hard because they weren't forming around your structure. So, and long carries. And then they had a bucket carry, with capped buckets. And they had this crazy thing. So they had a plate drag, and then going back out on your next lap, they had this crazy thing right after the transition zone where you had a standard size female Yokohama tire, the ones that some females even struggle with flipping, and you had to drag it backwards, like an Atlas carry, like that distance, and then do 5 burpees, and then drag it back. So, and it's funny because if you were on slick ground, that was good for the tire, but then you would slide. And it was just, that one was just, it gassed me every time because, yeah, I have enough trouble flipping those tires, forget dragging them. But you know what? I did it, so that's good. Yeah, lots of heavy stuff and lots of ice. And I think that was like the big challenges of this race. The other obstacles, Twister wasn't really rotating very good. I don't know if it was frozen. Some people were getting it. Some of the top guys, I think, got it. But for the most part, I think everybody was coming off Twister. And, yeah, the rig was pretty basic. It was all ring. So I think most people got that one. And it was right near the finish line, which totally helped. Yeah, and then they just had a bunch of ladders and just other stuff to gas you. It was actually pretty stacked with obstacles outside of that one huge climb, which is pretty standard for Spartan, right, is that they don't put anything on that big climb. And I don't know how they would have even put anything because it was slid down the hill, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're on the Canadian Spartan Pro team, correct?
Yeah. Well, I was last year.
Oh, you were last year. You're not on this year?
Well, I don't really. We haven't. They haven't released it yet.
Okay, for 2018, you're talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for 2017, I was on the Spartan team for Canada.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess I'll start off with this. Any word if they're going to go back to Iceland for a 24-hour race next year?
I don't know if they're joking about Antarctica, and I'm not really sure if that was a joke or I think my sense of humor, like 23 hours into a 24-hour race, is a little screwed up. But I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. It's hard to say. It would be hard to beat such a amazing venue. But and I think if they do that, they're going to have sellouts pretty fast up on the website, just because they did a really, really good job, and it was a really cool place to be.
Cool. So if, let's say if they went back to Iceland next year, would you go back, even if it was a month past World's Toughest? Like, are you happy with that decision?
I was happy with that decision this year. I'm so glad that I did it. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what I will do next year if they go back to Iceland and it is 1 month out. I'm definitely glad that I did it this year. I'm just not sure 100% that I'll repeat that. Maybe if I do go back next year, I'm just going to wear like a big Michelin Man suit so that when I fall, it doesn't hurt as much. But we'll see. I would love to go back, but it's a ways from Vancouver, BC, and just being a month out from World's Toughest, it'll probably be another one of those. Depends how my body heals from World's Toughest. This year I bounced back pretty quick. I felt okay. Obviously, even if you feel okay, you're not 100%, and I get that. But we'll see if I feel like it's going to cause injury for me to do, and then that's always going to be a no, right? So
yeah. So back here, I was checking up on the live feeds and stuff like that, and checking the results online over the weekend, and I just felt wrong not being at a 24-hour race. Like I felt like I was like skipping work or something. It was really weird being back here, being like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. I'm physically not there. So
would you have done all of the 24-hour OCR races if you had done this one?
Yes, in 2017.
That's crazy. Oh,
so
I can't believe it.
I did all of them over a 365-day span. So if you take from World's Toughest last year to World's Toughest this year, it was 6 24-hour races, and I finished top 10 in all of them. So that was like my
goodness, that is insane. That is consistent too. Wow.
So I was around the fence for a long time about Spartan Iceland, and then after World's Toughest, I just felt like I felt like I drained so much out of my body. And I was just, I don't know.
You're just kind of getting in at the end of the season, and it's not time for another race at that point, right?
Yeah, and like I feel like I put it all out there on World's Toughest, and I've just gotten so used to going all in on that single event, and then being like, and I'm done. Like I need to take a break. So.
Yeah, I think we're all so programmed, at least for us endurance racers, that after World's Toughest, it's like, all right, the wheels come off, and it's time to bring it in and make sure that we're recovered for the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't not. So
speaking of, what do you have planned for 2018? Like, what do you do? What's your training going to be like for the next month, and then kind of what are your big plans for 2018?
I'm going to take the rest of December off, just super easy, and just kind of recover it, which seems super weird to me because between World's Toughest Mudder and this race, I took it pretty easy. But maybe some like strength training and just doing other things, but more just to keep the mind fresh. Because I think even though like I was just in recovery mode between World's Toughest and Spartan Iceland, it still does take a little bit out of you kind of emotionally, and almost you need, and I feel like my body's pretty recovered outside of the knee that I hit so many times. When I was coming down, I kept on landing on the same knee, so it's really swollen and just really bruised up. But, that's just an external thing, and it'll heal up. But I think mentally you and emotionally you almost need this like little break off. So maybe I'll do some strength training and whatever to the end of December, and then January I'll be with the Resolutioners picking it back up and get ready for LA. So I'll be doing Toughest LA. I'm going to do as many of the toughest series as I can, but I also am doing the OCR World Championships Enduro, the 24 in Australia. So that'll probably be my big race for, the beginning of the year, and that'll be like my early season 24, and then I'll do World's Toughest. And that's my plans, but I don't know, if Spartan adds in a 24 again next year, which I'm feeling like they will, then maybe I'll have to throw that on the schedule too. But for right now, it's really my big focus is OCR 24 and World's Toughest, and then I really want to do some of the toughest series as well. But it seems like they all fall in June, so there's only something that can be done in June. And I signed up already for the OCR 24 when the toughest series came out. So.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Spartan will add a 24-hour race again next year. If I had to look at my crystal ball, I would say it wouldn't be Iceland, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like they may move it, but yeah. I don't know why I feel that way, so.
Cool. Well, that was pretty cool. Any other insights or experiences you want to share from the Iceland race?
No, I think we about covered it. Just want to say, like, big congrats to Morgan and Josh, because those guys just crushed it. Like, it was inspiring watching Morgan Mackay just fly through that. She's so strong and so powerful, and she has been training so hard for so many years to win, like a top-level endurance championship, and she's just put in so much work. And it's just really neat to be able to watch her be able to, just cruise through an event like this and just see all that training pay off. So that was neat to be a part of, just, watching her put it all together this race, because she was so strong, both mentally and physically, the whole race. It was super cool. And then Josh at the same time, who won the male side, he was just cruising through and just kind of crushing it and staying strong. So it was neat to be a part of that. So congratulations to both of them. And strangely, both of them got engaged this weekend. I kid you not. Josh proposed to his girlfriend or fiance now at the finish line, and Morgan's fiance proposed to her after. So both of the champions ended up getting engaged. So huge congrats to them for the race and for this huge life event that they're about to undertake.
Yeah, I was super happy for Morgan, especially after her getting knocked out of World's Toughest this past year. So that,
exactly.
Yeah.
She worked so hard. And so, yeah, it's really cool that she was able to take it and just put that all together.
I'm also kind of looking at the results right now and realize that Morgan beat Vanessa by 5 minutes and 20 seconds, which is... I know it shows that in the results, but she was like way ahead. Oh, okay.
And, so here's the thing. If you had until 12 o'clock to come in for your last lap. If you weren't at 12 o'clock, like if you were in 12:01, you DNF'd. DQ'd, I guess.
Okay.
So you would not count. And you had to go up by 9 for your last lap. You had to be out at 9 for your last lap. But I don't think Spartan totally took into account how long each lap would take. Like, each lap was, like, at least 2 to 3 hours, right? And that's, like, at a pretty blistering pace. So she just came in kind of on that bubble where she had, like, 3.5 hours to complete a lap, which is enough, but she would have had to, like, kind of haul it, right? And if she would have twisted an ankle and had to walk a bit or whatever, she would have DQ'd. So she actually sat at the finish line, like a half an hour. Okay. Waited, but she had to wait until 9. And Vanessa was pushing to get her burpees done so that she could get out there before 9 and race the last lap. So Morgan is like in this like horrible, like, do I go? Do I stay? So she ended up staying. And I think Vanessa was just over that 9 o'clock mark, and they figured that out when she was doing her burpees. So as soon as 9 o'clock hit, Morgan sprinted across the finish line, and then Vanessa had to finish her burpees before crossing. So yeah, it was a funny way that it worked out, and I think Spartan's not going to do that in the future, and they kind of realized that there was that hiccup that, could potentially happen again, but it worked out fine for Morgan. But yeah, she was way ahead. It's just she had to wait till 9 o'clock to cross the finish line. Gotcha.
Thanks for explaining that. That makes it much more clear.
I know, other people are like, 5 minutes, what? But no, she's sitting around like half an hour.
Because that's the thing on these ultra races. Like, you're never quite sure where everyone is, so you're always like, is someone about to pass me? Is someone picking up strength in the second half of the race? So 5 minutes in a 24-hour race is like, that's like seconds in a sprint, right? When you look at the percentage of the race.
Right? It would have been awful if Vanessa did make it under that cusp and could go out again, because then they would have been battling to go sub 3 hours on this, and Morgan would be cold because she's standing around, right? So trying to get like back up to speed would have been a big challenge. So she could have just passed her because of this, like, this crazy rule thing. But it didn't happen, and Morgan took it, thankfully, because, she had worked so hard for it. It would have just been like crazy if they would have had to like battle it out on the last lap. would have been entertaining for people to watch, but yeah.
So last question. Now, I don't recognize a lot of these names. I'm assuming some of them are European. World's Toughest, we generally know who's in top contention, and, you kind of know a little bit about them, so you know if they're going to kind of gain or slow down towards the end. Was that challenging or interesting, like not knowing who these people are, or do you know a lot of the other top females besides Morgan?
I really just knew Morgan, but it was pretty easy to see Vanessa was like a ball of energy. She was pretty awesome. And I think she's David Dietrich's girlfriend. So a lot of people kind of knew her and were like, oh yeah, she's, she was just cruising and looking great, just really fit and really energized. So I don't know. I wasn't like in it to like win it necessarily, right? Like I was just kind of more there for the experience. So I wasn't really stressing about where anybody was or how fast they were or, trying to make any plans like that. I was just kind of like, well, this is what I got today. I'm just going to like, try to minimize my falling and, try to keep a decent pace. And so I just kind of more focused on me anyways, but it was kind of neat seeing like, the lady in fourth was from Iceland. So, she was on her home turf and how she kind of reacted differently. And, I didn't get to figure out much on the men's side just because the laps were so long and I wasn't really hearing a lot of what was happening. So sometimes I like when I'm racing to kind of follow along on the men's side just because it gives me something else to kind of focus on, but I wasn't really able to do that this race. But Josh, I think is I think he's from World's Toughest community. I've seen him everywhere. He's a superb athlete. So I knew him, and then David Dietrich has just been in the community a lot. So I've seen him quite a bit. Those guys are like superior power hikers and very strong. So it's not a wonder that they just ripped this course up. But, there was definitely a lot of Europeans and stuff like that I didn't know, and that was kind of neat. Or even just when you're walking along on the course, and you strike up a conversation with somebody and it's kind of like, in broken English, or you like, trying to like have a conversation and figure out what words to kind of use. I think that's kind of the neat part, right? It's just meeting so many new people from new places, and a race like this, you're kind of just immersed. And Europe has so many different cultures and so many different countries that are so cultural and just pocketed out that you do really get to meet people from a wide variety of circumstances. And I think that's kind of one of the magic pieces of a race like this.
Cool. Well, sounds like it was a great experience. Thanks again for coming on. Any final shout outs you want to give before we sign off?
Nope, just Morgan and Josh, way to rock it. And anybody that, went out there and completed any amount of laps. I know a lot of people were shooting for 50, like in the World's Toughest community, and kind of got like rocked that's not going to happen. But 30 was the new 50, and a lot of people made it to 30, which was pretty awesome. And even if you made one lap, I mean, that was an intense course. So you guys should be feeling pretty proud of yourself, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we'll see that again in Atlanta where the baseline changes, with as far as, what's attainable for, the average participant showing up. And I mean, you can see it at the top level. The World's Toughest winner had 110, and the Spartan Iceland had 71. And a lot of that has to do with just course variation, the ability to run and elevation change and obstacle density and weather. There's so many factors. I mean, when I was doing Battle Fog Extreme, I won a race with, I think, 4 laps. It was in Cincinnati. And then I came in third in the North Carolina one with 7 laps, right? Because it was it was pancake flat. But, I mean, same obstacles, basically. Different terrain, different weather. And, pretty different placements despite the significantly more miles I ran at the other venue. So
it makes such a big difference. Like, there was just nowhere to run on this course. And so that really took us runners out at the knees, which is kind of cool, right? Like, there's a lot of obstacle races. It depends on being able to run between obstacles and then make it across the obstacles efficiently. And for this one, it wasn't. It was like, how, can you make it? It was like a constant obstacle, right? So I think that was kind of neat. Even as a runner, I totally appreciated the fact that it was not a runner's course, and it was a totally new challenge for 24 hours to not be able to run and just kind of get into that, like, groove and to kind of always be challenged by the terrain. It's kind of a neat, feature.
Cool. Well, it was great hearing from you, and I'm going to try to push this out hopefully today or tomorrow. So give people an update as far as how Iceland was. So again, thanks, Allison, for coming on. Looking forward to seeing you at several of the toughest events next year. And yeah.
You too.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You as well. Enjoy the holidays. Nice to have some downtime. We need that.
Yeah, no kidding.